in this building through both the Senate and the House of Representatives, with all of the politicians, if we cannot stop these killings of innocent people, then what are we doing here? What are we doing to address a national crisis that's been a national crisis for 34 years and more? What are we doing as politicians? So I came into this place with this message stick of 441 deaths in custody when I entered this building as a politician. 441 markings. Now it's 602. When does it end? When will the systemic racism that is rife throughout every state territory in this country, when will they stop killing us? When will we stop being the bottom rung of society in our own country? So thank you to the government for supporting the motions, and thank you to all of those other parties that allowed it to go through. But now we have to see action. We know the Prime Minister will rock up at Garma and say some nice things, but words are cheap. We want action. So this is for the Yendamu community who've lost 2 young people that should be here today. And this is for Ned, who's been fighting for justice, who wants guns out of his community so that the community can self-determine what is best for them. Government control needs to stop controlling our destiny. And that's what the motion also includes.
Should the federal government be restricting funding to the Northern Territory over its tough on crime laws?
Absolutely. I mean, these closing the gap targets and this yearly betrayal of the states and territories not acting on closing the gap, if there's no consequences to not closing the gap, then what's the point of having it? Year after year, we get a report that says, oh, by the way, we're failing in most areas, but let's pat ourselves on the back for, getting some numbers increased with maybe some employment. But while our people are dying and being locked up at the rate that we are, and while the Northern Territory puts spit hoods on 10-year-olds, where's the consequence? The federal government paid the Northern Territory cops $205 million out of closing the gap money to what? Lock up 400 kids in the last 6 months? To put spit hoods on 10-year-olds? It's outrageous. So yes, there needs to be consequences for not closing the gap. Otherwise, don't take the money. Absolutely. The Northern Territory government are complicit in genocide of Aboriginal people in this country. They are going backwards. They are being paid to lock up our children, to lock up our people, and there is no support for self-determination. Self-determination means that we decide what is best for us, that we are resourced for the programs that we say are best for us. So Northern Territory are dismally failing, purposely failing, closing the gap targets. And that $205 million should be ripped out of the cops' hands and put straight into the community's self-determining programs. Oh, it's devastating. It's devastating. As the only black sovereign woman in this whole place, you know, you might have blackfellas in other parties, but they are towing the line of their parties. So what are they doing about deaths in custody? What are they doing? Their families are affected, but they choose to sit silent and not challenge their parties to do anything. This is a reminder of the devastation and the trauma that we all have to endure as black people in this country. And this whole parliament needs to take responsibility to stop these deaths and to stop the removals, because we know that children that are removed from their families end up in the youth justice system and then in the adult system. And they're lucky to survive. We see this, we've seen it for 34 years. John Pat was the first death in custody that the Royal Commission was based upon. So when does it end, is my question. And they're the questions that needs to be asked of the government.
Sorry, Senator, the Dharma Festival this weekend, PM will be there making a speech. What would you like to see from the government, from the Prime Minister, in terms of the next move forward in Indigenous policies in the Labor government?
Well, they need to commit to oversight of the 339 recommendations that have been there for 34 years on someone's shelves. No one's had oversight of those recommendations for 2 decades since the demise of ATSIC. They've been sitting there for 2 decades. No one gave a damn that deaths in custody were still happening. So oversight and action on implementing the remainder of those recommendations. Removing hanging points would be great. We know that there's been hanging points that have been used 20 times. The prisons know, the cops know, the governments know, yet they allow people to continue to take their lives in known hanging points. A recommendation from the Royal Commission is to remove them, to provide mental health services, to allow communities to self-determine their own solutions. So it'd be great if the Prime Minister took it seriously and not just rock up to see, you know, culture on display. He needs to rock up and tell this country that he takes this issue very seriously and that he's taking responsibility as the Prime Minister, and he is going to implement the remainder of those recommendations and ensure that there is oversight. Well, which communities? Which communities are they making safer? The white communities or the black communities? Why don't they talk about a whole community? Why aren't they talking about our community? So it's not making any community safer. Locking up children does not make communities safer. The experts have said this time and time again. 10-year-old children should be cared for by their families and their communities. They need love, they need nurturing. Surely everyone in this country can understand that. I don't understand why the Northern Territory Chief Minister doesn't understand that. She's continuing a genocide by taking our children, locking them up, putting a spittle on them, strip searching them, 10-year-olds. I'm sure you all have a 10-year-old part of your family somewhere. Think about that for a moment. Are they safe because they're not black? Why are our kids being targeted? So, want to talk about communities being safe? Why don't you talk about our communities being safe? Did you want to say something?
I want to thank Senator Thorpe for her very important motion this morning in the Senate and the opportunity to speak on it in the House. It's unfathomable that we are still here calling on the government to implement the recommendations of a Royal Commission into deaths in custody. The death this year during NAIDOC week of Kumanjayi White, followed by the report, the coronial report into the death of Kumanjayi Walker's death only a few years before, is just so deeply unacceptable. As an ally, representing my community in Warringah, we feel keenly, speaking for many non-Indigenous Australians, who feel keenly the frustration that successive governments have failed to act on these recommendations. A comparison would be, in this place, we implemented immediately an oversight task force to implement recommendations in this place for this to be a safer and more respectful place. Within 2 years, they were implemented. And yet, for many decades, we have incredibly crucial recommendations, practical solutions like an audit of all hanging points within custody and for they to be immediately removed. It is just unfathomable that this continues on the back of so many calls for action that we are still seeing in 2025. Kumanjayi White died in police custody just 24th of May 2025 during NAIDOC week. I think we all need to pause and reflect. It is unfathomable, I think, for non-Indigenous Australians to truly appreciate the frustration, the anger, the sadness, the hurt that you feel. That stick should be on the Prime Minister's desk as a permanent reminder of that every delay in action is the risk of another notch on that horrendous stick. That is a national shame, that stick. So I call on the Prime Minister to immediately put in place a task force and an urgent process to implement those recommendations. And we have to address the age of criminality. We have states and territories incarcerating 10-year-olds. This starts a trajectory of engagement with the justice system that only ends in a terrible direction. This is not keeping communities safe. It actually engenders more violence and more issues. Australia has signed the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, but we have never ratified it in legislation. And the excuse from the government about this age of criminality issue is always that it's a question of states and territories. But if we pass a Federal Rights of the Child Act, we can override that and ensure that we keep 10-year-olds safe. All 10-year-olds in Australia should be respected, valued, nurtured, cared for, and certainly not incarcerated. So I commend Senator Thorpe for her actions, her passion, incredible leadership on behalf of Indigenous Australians. We have to, and all Australians, I have to say, all Australians, when it comes to the frustration on this issue.
Thank you.
That is a horrible stick.
Thanks. A shame. Thank you for you. I can just
It's
up and do
incredibly
that
frustrating.
every time for two. The trauma. And bring that. It's a lot. And I do feel shame. I've got to get it updated now.
Can we make for the parliament? As we have a lot of artefacts downstairs on level 1 for everyone visiting the parliament.
Well, I'm happy to give this to the Parliament just as a reminder, as long as it doesn't have to keep being updated.
As long as it doesn't have to keep updated, yes. Thanks.
But yeah,
Can we do a photo with that up just so we can get a let me show you.